I'll probably in the word. It's 2 p.m. and it's great to see everybody. So, we begin the meeting with public comment. Is there anybody from the public who wishes to comment? There being one, we can move on to our second item of business to vote to approve the August 15th meeting minutes. Did anybody have any feedback or corrections to offer? Everybody get a chance to take a look at them.
Just say great job by Lisa.
I didn't do them.
You didn't?
Dak did them.
Dak.
Good editing. It was good editing.
Whoever did a great job then, Jack. Thank you.
Then I'll entertain motions to approve. Motions to approve. Is there a second? Ron seconds this. Let's start on Zoom. Maggie, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Panucci?
Yes.
Reagan?
Yes.
Kim? Oh, Kim, you're a non-voting member, so sorry about that. Arthur?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson? Yes. And there's no rhyme or reason to whether I'm using first or last name. Ron? Yes. Eric?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Alex votes yes. Did I miss anybody? No. Okay, the motion passes. Whew. Just have a feeling it's we've done some business. And actually, before we move on to item 4, did anybody offer to be the minutes taker for this meeting?
Well, I'll do it this meeting, but I would entertain nominations for next meeting.
Volunteer.
Whoever clicks in as last has to do it.
Under the wrestle.
Thank you. Okay.
Great. So the two main things I wanted to spend the bulk of our time together today on are items 4 and 5. 4 is to spend some time discussing how our working groups are going to work together, what processes you want to use, and what deliverables you want to work towards. I tried to stir the pot a little bit this month and get folks focused on something sort of narrow and tangible that made sense to me, but I do want it to be a discussion. I didn't really think through in advance how this would work with half of us on Zoom and half of us here. I think it'd be tough to have like 4 discussions about working group plans. And so that's item 4, and item 5 is to just go over the state goals that folks researched and put in the Airtable. So I'm happy to do these in either order, and I'm just wondering whether people would prefer to start with the goals since we were working on that, or would people prefer to start with talking about working group processes. Can I see a quick show of hands for going in the order it's written, with working group first, or okay? And who would prefer to start with topic 5? Okay, so I guess we'll keep it in order.
This is the vote I need to record.
No, I'm just no. So how to make this productive? Who well, first of all, actually, can I join the Zoom? I want to show, remember one thing I wanted to do. I'd like to show the rosters that I have got based on your email responses, and just do a quick check with all of you that got the right names in the right places. So so we know who's on which working group. And take sort of a last call. I think the buildings working group is suffering from members. So put times there. Am I able to share?
Should
Can you
be.
make it possible for me to share?
Make you a co-host.
Okay.
Does that work?
And the primary focus on the emissions mitigations working groups. So on transportation, I heard from Lisa Troy, Carl Johnson, Stephen Popkin, and Eric Miller interest in working on that. Is that correct?
Yep.
How are you so interested?
Again, I'm on, I don't know how many everyone should be in, how many groups everyone should be in.
As many as you can stand.
So I can, I feel like I'll maybe put more of my time into the mitigations since there's less people working on this. But
Yeah, I would say that the emissions mitigation is the priority that the select board gave us. I definitely think it's important for us to be talking about adaptation as well. But the town has a hazard mitigation plan in place. We're a little further ahead on some of those topics. Great. So for buildings, it's just me. Can I convince anybody to work with me on this? You don't have to answer right now. Great. Fugitive emissions. Nobody. Did I miss somebody? Okay. And the waste management working group. I have Arthur, Jack, and Kim Johnson. And there's quite a few folks from Sustainable Milton who are engaged with that as well. So I think we're okay there.
Yep.
Let's see some.
Alex,
Yes.
the working group will be meeting next Monday, and it'll also consist of Lauren Borowski and Christina, known as Kiki, Leatherhook.
Wonderful. Okay.
Question about these groups.
Yes.
Since especially new people are still getting their feet under them on what to do, I'm assuming this is not something, these rosters don't have to be static through the term. Is that correct?
No, they're informal. They're not subcommittees. They're critically not subcommittees. You just groups of residents, and you can engage, and you should engage anybody in town or outside of town who has appropriate expertise to help. Like right now, I'm just focused on making sure that there are names from this committee on this roster. I think at some point I'll want to flesh this out to a more complete roster of everybody who's participating. So there's quite a few folks in the conservation working group who are not part of this committee who I don't have on this list. But yes, no, it's not limited to committee members, and there's nothing saying that you can't help out on one of these topics just because you're not on my roster. But I do want some people to put their names on it so I know who I can pursue for progress.
I'd be happy to branch out the part.
Great.
Just so I'm clear, what's the work of the future?
So fugitive emissions is on this list because it's more emissions than it's in the top four. It's primarily gas leaks.
Right. What will be the role of the committee versus?
To come up with some response to that. to address gas leaks and refrigerant leaks.
Outside of the gas.
Yeah, so Tracy Dyke Redmond was taking this on before she had to step down. And there is a one pager that she put together with some suggestions. That's all. So, and natural land conservation, which sequesters 6% of Milton's emissions annually. So it's an important component of net zero. Ron, Maggie, Michi, and Fiona Jevin. Arthur also. Can I put your name on this, Arthur?
If you'd like, sure.
There we go. Okay. So for heat waves, I have Anna Morgan Bersamian and Kyle Johnson. Okay. Nobody on intense storms and wind damage. Flooding is myself and Arthur, although we haven't done much since we put our name on this a year ago. But does that sound right to you, Arthur?
Alex, a lot of that's going to, in some areas, in particular the Neponset River, involve the Neponset Watershed River Association, to which Milton has a representative, and we might contact that person to see if they would join this working group. They have tremendous resources at NEPRA detailing flood maps along the river waterway that we want to take advantage of. So I just tossed that out. We can talk offline about it, but I wanted to put it in your mind at this time.
Great. Energy security and grid resilience, myself, wildfire, Matt Panucci and Fiona Jevin, and drought, Kyle Johnson, Matt Panucci, and Fiona Jevin. Does this all sound right? And Reagan, you have an idea of which working groups you'd like to participate in, please let me know.
Yeah, I think I emailed you a little while ago. I would be totally fine working. I thought the drought and then the fugitive emissions would be really cool. So
Did you say drought and fugitive emissions?
yeah, that would be amazing.
Okay. Where's drought? Fun. Okay. So,
for drought, just FYI, for drought and for wildfire. So Fiona and I have kind of kicked off a couple of calls, and so for Johnson and for Reagan, let me just add you to those Zooms, and hopefully they work. It's just framework discussion, research that we're trying to get kicked off, who kind of owns what. So I'll just add you to those invites, and hopefully it works scheduling wise. Great.
So,
I'll ask a question, if I may.
yes.
Going back to flooding,
Yeah.
we want to consider titling that as flooding and stormwater.
Sure.
Okay.
Stormwater does cause flooding.
As do riverways and oceans, just so that nobody doesn't think that we're not going to be taking a look at stormwater management systems, drainage systems, the impact of pervious and impervious coverings in the town of Milton, and a whole host of other things. This is becoming a rather pronounced topic. The annual meeting of the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissions next month has about 5 program sessions on stormwater, indicating the increasing concern from communities because those topics for the curriculum, based upon what communities have asked, be covered, and those are 5 different non-repetitive topics.
Ron, did you also have a question?
Yeah. Is there a need to have so many different groups? Say that for two reasons. One, looking towards the presentation of the plan, that it might be to some people confusing or overwhelming. And secondly, if the focus is on mitigation, some of the groups, we don't know that much about the technical makeup of all the topics, but some of them seem to be more adaptation focused.
Well, yeah, the right-hand side is adaptation, left-hand side is mitigation here. And I agree with you. Our priority should be mitigation, particularly this, at least four of the working groups on the left should be our focus. That's why I put them explicitly on the agenda, because I think there's a lot more to figure out in terms of aligning on goals and deliverables and timelines for the adaptation areas. The thing that's in our charge is coming up with a plan for reducing townwide greenhouse gas emissions in alignment with Massachusetts net zero goals. And that's, I mean, really, 80% of it, more than 80% of it is transportation and building. Right? So I do think your point is well taken. There's a lot of topics here. I mean, I do think to be complete, we'll need to address them, but sequence and prioritization is important as well. So I'll circle back and say, anybody wants to help me with buildings? It's 42% of the emissions, and probably if you cut out pass-through traffic, it's the number one. Oh.
Who caved? I couldn't see. Congratulations. It was you got there a millisecond before me. I felt the pressure, so well done.
I could see his icy glare at me.
Yeah, this was the three. It's a fun topic, actually. So yeah, we'll see how this goes. Maybe what we will need to do is sort of tee up a conversation that you guys can get together outside of this meeting and have about how are we going to work together, what are we going to do first. What I'd like to get to is we're not going to be able to just declare this is how much we're going to get done this month. Right? I mean, the work is new to all of us and it's pretty complicated. But I do think it is important to kind of set up a rhythm where we make some kind of claim about what we're going to do over the next month, something verifiable, and then try to hold ourselves accountable to it, which is not the same thing as like, if you can't get it done, you're a bad person. It's just the there's a lot more momentum in sort of trying to set a target for what you're going to do month to month, and following up on whether it happened, even if it falls short, that's fine. It's just really the process of being transparent with each other and trying to set up some cadence where people know what to expect and when they're going to be meeting. So if we could, I don't know, at least align on like when do the working groups want to meet with each other? Do you want to meet in person, online, synchronously, asynchronously? And I know there was some confusion this week about whether like I wanted a response from everybody or just from the leader. I'd be fine either way. But I don't think it was clear like who the leaders are. And
Sure.
So let's get a little more clarity on that. So how we want to cover this.
So, Eric and I met at the library. Alex came, and I thought that was nice because we could really dive in. So I think I would propose for transportation having two, maybe hour and a half meetings between our meetings to get work done. And the library is a nice place to meet. And so we could align on what times work best. And if it's hard to attend in person, we could do, someone could join us remotely in that way if it was a meeting. So I guess, Kim, Stephen, and Eric, do you have times that would work best? Evenings or weekends?
So that's this.
Yeah,
I stayed down there.
There's two K Johnsons.
There's two Johnsons.
Yeah.
You were my
I do, yeah.
See, these initials were throwing me.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was trying to make it all clear.
Okay.
Suggest if we can fill up with it, and especially if we have remote people, I would also want to be volunteer to my house, which is not too far from the location, so that would make it easier to check everybody.
And I'll say too, if, I could set up a Zoom at town hall if you need that too. Or just get a room here as well.
And I think if people need Zoom, Sustainable Milton can help with that too.
Yeah. I've worked Zoom. Okay, so I'll send out an email and we'll align on what days. We'll try to make it a cadence. So maybe, like the week after we meet and then a break and then the week before the next.
Maybe Thursdays even, if we already have that day kind of blocked in our heads. Perhaps.
Thursdays are my busiest day, but
We can negotiate.
I think
I think
4 busy Thursdays.
I really like the idea of the working group meeting, off cycle. It probably, especially if people are participating in more than one, it might get tough for people, for everybody to be at all of them. So some mix of having it on the calendar so that people can come, can have the opportunity to kind of put their heads together, but also agreeing what the focus is for the month, so that if people want to do it asynchronously and kind of check in with that.
Yeah.
For me, weekdays are more challenging for you. More.
I know it can be really hard to find good time.
So I think my feeling is it's gonna be hard to really nail it down.
Yeah.
If we were all together, we said let's just go in the corner.
Yeah.
So you will follow up with the transportation group to nail it down. And let me know where you land with that. Similarly with buildings, since it's just me and Eric at the moment, I might be able to glom on to whatever you do.
No bombing.
We'll see. So Arthur, you have a solid waste working group meeting set up for Monday, you said. Is that are you planning on a regular cadence for that?
That's the plan to work out with the committee on Monday. So I would say tentatively yes, and we're looking at 90-minute meetings. We'll have an agenda for that.
we
And
probably,
Jack has arranged for it to be held at the town hall.
and so Ron, I think you had some thoughts for the conservation group, not just about the meeting cadence, but and I only shared it right before the meeting, but you have put together a pretty comprehensive working plan with the conservation group. So do you want to take some time to tell us about that? And let me
Yeah, so we've met over the summer a couple of times in person, and then intermittently through email. And we've come up with 3 goals. The goals reflect the interests of the members of the working group who represent different conservation land interests throughout Milton. So it includes Friends of the Blue Hills, the Ponset River Watershed Association, the Shade Tree Advisory Committee, and the Conservation Commission that we've yet to meet with. That's probably the missing link right now in this plan. But as of now, we've identified 3 goals for their 2-year goals. One is reducing the impact of climate change on private property that abuts the Blue Hills and the Ponset River Valley. The second one is increasing the amount of shade trees in Milton. And the third one is improving the quality and the mitigation effectiveness of the tree stock in the Blue Hills. And for each of those goals, our working group has identified a strategy and a series of activities to achieve the goals. And for each of the goals, I'm using kind of get mixed up in my usage of the term goals. For each of the working group goals, we have linked them to the goals for the state as identified in the State Forest Action Plan of 2020. And we listed those goals. Those goals are non-quantifiable goals. Maybe I'll hold off on getting into the goals discussion until we come to that part of the meeting. But so the 3 working group goals are linked to those. And yeah, so I mean, I would say we're almost done with this phase of our work. All of the committee members have had an opportunity to review this draft. It would be great if the broader climate change, climate planning action committee could also review it and give us some feedback. There are, of course, some big questions which I think are going to reemerge for each of the working groups. The biggest question is, now that we have our goals and we have our approach and our strategy and activities, how is this going to happen? Where is the funding and the resources going to come from to make what I think is a fairly realistic and relatively small scale and affordable set of conservation land working group goals? How can we make that happen?
So recognizing that we sent this out after the normal. So normally when we're bringing materials to the committee and we want to have we're expecting people to have read it and be prepared to discuss it in detail. Those should be distributed by the Friday before, so people have a chance to do it over the weekend. So this, you got something that, right? So I was saying, not expecting that people will be ready with detailed feedback now. Let's plan on looking over this and having some feedback and suggestions for the next meeting. Yes.
What is the proper forum to do that? Proper place to do it for this group?
We're somewhat we are somewhat constrained by the open meeting laws. Not really clear in my own mind where the line is between providing some feedback offline and conferring. I would handle that by making a copy of it and putting my comments in that and sharing it one-to-one maybe with the document owner, in this case, Brian. So that way it's just between you and him. That's not a forum conferring. You're free to discuss it offline.
And just as sort of follow-up question, it's okay for us to reach out to like the Positive River Watershed Association or Friends of the Blue Hills, all those organizations, to get their thoughts and feedback about the canopy and
yes,
goals.
Yeah. Just to, can I have the screen share back?
Yeah.
A lot of this came from those groups. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's true, but the sort of general push of should we be reaching out to relevant people to get their feedback and input? Absolutely. I think that's really going to be the majority of the work that we do time. But the focus I'd like us to have in the near term is, I think we did a fair amount of that last year, and I think found that engaging stakeholders is hard if you're not yet clear on what you're proposing. Everybody's concerned about climate, but not many people kind of know what climate action would consist of. Even I think for all of us, it's still a learning process. What are the state's goals that we said we would make a plan to achieve? So just put up as a refresher our kind of high level Gantt chart. Yeah, so we did throughout last year, expert and stakeholder engagement. We sort of put together some, like a one pager of sort of top action recommendations in each section. We talked to folks about them. But yeah, at the pace we were going, we talked to a bunch of folks at town hall who now no longer work here, so I think we should get to a place where we have a fairly complete listing of the goals and strategies that we want to work towards. Maybe not all the way down, breaking it down to action, because we may want to prioritize first before we start planning near-term action. But I think when I say a complete draft plan, it should be sort of working backwards from the goals, the emissions outcomes, to make sure that we're proposing outcomes that would actually meet the charge, right? And they're gonna feel totally impossible. And then the question then will be, what strategies can we employ to move in that direction? Right? Like you'll probably have a goal that 90% of vehicles will be EVs by 2050, something like that. Obviously, you can't go out and just start forcing people to buy 1,000 a year. So where do you begin? And I think once we've got the goals and we've got strategies for how we'll begin, it'll become clearer who would be involved in executing on those strategies. And then another question I have, total question mark for me, is the second star and approved climate action plan. Presumably that's by the select board and or town meeting, but I'm not really sure what that process will look like.
Question kind of related to this in terms of what's the thought process for managing redundancies and overlap? Because I could see a lot of like I already know, like tree canopy and shade trees are already part of some of the other working group plans that are being worked on. So is there thinking about how to oversee that, like people aren't doing the same research or having the same conversations more than necessary?
That's one reason that it's kind of in desperation over exactly what you're talking about. While I set up that Airtable with the forums, I know it probably felt like a lot of digital overhead, but the problem I've been having is over the summer, I was trying to draft out just the building section of the climate action plan and just finding almost everything I looked at belonged in several categories, right? And so it feels a lot easier to me to like put it in a database and tag it to both categories and then just move on. And then, so I think if we have a central repository of the sort of strategies, actions, and goals that we're considering, we can all look there, and if you put something in that turns out to be a duplicate, like, well, we can review it periodically and go, hey, these are duplicates.
Is that what you meant, or did you mean that like other parts of town government or what?
No, I don't know.
We aren't supposed to figure that out too.
Great. Okay.
Because there is a shade tree.
Right.
They're planning 350 trees.
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder if it makes sense to have someone who's in charge of like checking on, I guess that's what our overall meetings would be for, but like checking with, like reading what everyone's drafting on a regular basis to check for redundancies.
Man, I'm definitely doing some of that. It gets a little overwhelming. I'm trying to get it all collected in one place, because one problem we had last year was we produced a lot of documents, and then like multiple drafts of documents on the same topic. It's just a little hard to know what's in there. I think it's going to be hard regardless.
I have a question, it's Maggie. So I know last year when we started, you had us look at multiple towns, different climate action plans. And there were different parts of each town, that I kind of like different parts of. I'm wondering if there's, did you have a town that you thought was, a really top-notch plan? Because the state goals are the same state goals no matter what town we are in. Our approach might be different because our lands are different and our buildings are different and our cut-through traffic is different. But I'm wondering, is there one climate action plan in particular that you really like and you are striving for Milton to adopt?
There's no one plan that I feel like, oh, I'll just cut and paste lots of this. I think there are several plans that I like aspects of. One issue is that the state's goals have evolved a lot in the last few years. The climate law committing Massachusetts to net zero was passed in 2021. And then, of course, it takes agencies year, 2 year, 3 years to sort of promulgate the plans that were mandated by the law. And so those have come out in 2022, 2023. And a lot of the better plans from towns that are really on top of this are much older than that. So some of their goals are like way more aggressive than the state's goal, which I just don't. I mean, I think things are hard enough. So I couldn't like take them without modification. Then, so like Acton is an example of a town that is similar in size to Milton and is been very forward leaning on climate action planning. So I think theirs is a good resource. And then some of the larger cities have good plans that were very, very thoughtfully done and are more recent, like Somerville, I think is a good resource. I just found I didn't even have that one until a couple weeks ago, but I really like it. But it's Somerville, so they have a sustainability staff of 11, so their plan is like going to be a little more ambitious.
That's what I was sort of wondering, because there are bigger communities with staff, you know, do we really necessarily have to reinvent the wheel? And if you have, you know, you've been doing this a long time, you've been on Sustainable Milton forever. So, you know, you've been sort of, you know, dreaming of this, I would assume. And so, you know, I don't want to then come in and, you know, do something a little bit different that might be you know, different than what you're envisioning. So it'd be nice to have kind of a template of things that you're sort of, you know, thinking.
So I'd say I do envision this process as one of like reading other town plans and the state's plans and like drawing from those to create our own plan. And you know, none of us here is qualified to like invent climate solutions from whole cloth. They're all based in science. They're all based in emerging technologies. They're all based in research that's been done at the federal and state and nonprofit level. I mean, there's so much information out there. And I think the challenge that I've felt, and I feel like we've all been experiencing, is it's just so much information that organizing it into something coherent that's also appropriate for Milton has been much harder than I thought it would be.
I has done an excellent job kind of laying it out simply, you know, 1, 2, 3, you know, and then so that's is this kind of how you're envisioning each category to do it? So, you know, we are creating one plan and the plan should be cohesive. So it would be nice to know what kind of just template, you know, you talk about the goals. Do you want the goals listed, you know, and then right next to it is a strategy? Like, is there an actual template you want us to kind of follow?
Yeah, I'd love to get there, but let me show you what I do have in mind, and this was kind of lying behind my ask for this month. Definitely a common theme across all the climate action plans that I've seen is that they're organized into goals, strategies, and actions. I think depending on which climate action plan you look at, they're not always really sort of consistent about what they mean by these things. But like a goal is an outcome. Right? It's not how you're going to get there or who's going to do it. It's the physical verifiable outcome in the world that would directly cause emissions to be reduced. So, and that's what we're collecting this month. X many cars are electrified, or per household vehicle miles traveled is reduced by 2030 by this much. Just to clarify, like, what are you trying to do? And then usually, linked to each goal are strategies. Right? How are we going to approach that? And that can be qualitative, right? So I think we may have a goal that every household in Milton would have access to charging infrastructure that would make it possible for them to own EVs. But it would probably be unwise to say, well, therefore, Massachusetts plans to install 7,000, so let's do 50. With proportional or something. But I think Milton is a highly residential town where lots of people have driveways. So it's not the need for EV infrastructure may be different in Milton than the rest of Massachusetts. So the strategy might be to begin with a study of where there are people who want EVs but can't get them to it. Anyway, the point is that the strategies are probably where the meat of the thinking is in terms of what kind of outreach programs do we need, what partners do we work with, and what are the deliverables? Are we getting bylaws passed? Are we doing an outreach program? And then I think once we have like a fairly clear vision in terms of goals and strategies, I think breaking it down to the action level, who's going to do what by when, is more like a prioritization thing where that's where we get serious about, okay, with the resources we actually have, what do we do next? Like planning out detailed actions for things you don't even have the resources to do today is maybe a waste of time. But this is how I'm thinking about it. This slide deck is linked from the Google Doc version of the agenda that I sent out, and we went over it in May as well, but most of you were there for that, so I would revisit it. Any questions or input on this?
Are we into the part of the agenda where we're talking about goals?
We could segue into that
I have
pretty
a
soon.
request,
That's
though.
not quite, yeah.
So I'm just, I've thought a bit about this, and we've gone back and forth a little bit. The state goals in some areas are not quantified, and I know that you lean heavily, and I support you in having quantifiable goals. Where they are quantifiable, they're statewide, and just in terms of thinking through what that means to tiny but beloved Milton, I mean, we're just a little sliver of that. And in order to put energy into figuring out how we contribute to the state goals itself, I think is a fairly heavy-duty process. So in our conservation land working group, we gave credence to the state goals, both quantifiable and not quantifiable, but we put priority on outcomes. I mean, this is lingo, but our plan is categorized in terms of 3 goals right now. And for each goal, there are 2-year outcomes, which most of them probably don't deal with the amount of CO2 that we have mitigated as a result of our work. But the outcomes do relate to the concrete progress steps that can verify whether this goal within the context of Milton, not necessarily the whole state, can be reached.
Yeah, I mean, I think conservation is a bit of a special beast. It sort of straddles adaptation and mitigation. The state's goals for natural land conservation basically come down to increasing permanent conservation land and minimizing losses of forest land overall. And I know that's something that many of you on the conservation working group are concerned about maintaining our green space in Milton. So I think that's going to be a good fit. And you'll eventually want to have some capacity to monitor. Are we maintaining our tree canopy in Milton? And there's a goal to increase conservation land statewide from 27% of currently to 30% by 2030 and 40% by 2050. We already are above 30% of Milton land mass, so I think it's kind of a judgment call of what the target would be in Milton. But I just think that's the thought process that should be included in this on some level. But also there are all these things that are more in the adaptation realm, like it needs to be healthy land, and that's so much harder to quantify. And so I don't, all of this stuff is important.
The sequestration goal for the state is 25% below the 1990 level by 2030. That's what you sent to me, and it seems like a reasonable goal, but I just don't know to actually measure that goal in the small activities that we're doing. Don't know how practical.
Matt, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just a question. Ron's mentioned 2 years is his time horizon on his goals, and it's absolutely possible that I missed the 2-year window for these goals. Is that for all of the working groups, or is this something that that Ron is comfortable with, and he's working in kind of a tighter window as opposed to 2025, 2030, and 2050?
Yeah, I know that those come from this working group and from the goal of trying to put something together that is concrete and kind of measurable within a short window frame of time, which I think would appeal to maybe members of the select board, whoever is reviewing this, as opposed to going out further time-wise to 2030 or 2050. So I don't think anybody else is doing this yet, and we're kind of the first to propose it.
Yeah, first guinea pig.
Other people don't think it's really.
And I could understand it. Again, it's not right or wrong. I could understand it if there's a lot of kind of infrastructure to build. That's the wrong word. Let's say a lot of research to do, a lot of relationship building to do. In other words, you need a couple of years to really get set up and develop a baseline, at which point then you can start to set quantifiable targets, for 2030 as an example. So I think that would make more sense in kind of a setup mode, if you see what I mean. And again, I've read the plan, Ron, but you'll know it better than I. Is that kind of the thought process here in terms of that tighter window? Is there's just so much work to do to kind of get set up and get active here that we really can't dream about, conserving land, target of X in Milton by 2030 because we have so much setup work to do. And so that's really the focus for the next 24 months.
Right, that's the rationale that we use.
I would just prefer a plan that says like this impossible thing over here is where we're trying to go.
Yeah.
And we don't know how to get there. This is where we're starting. I'd rather have a plan that just admits that rather than kind of leaving out.
Yeah. I just think that's important. At least it's important for me. Maybe other folks caught that as kind of an acceptable way to approach this. But helpful for me to think about that as, a step towards something obviously much larger, which is going to have to fall in line with the state targets. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
Lisa, you were going to say something?
Yeah,
Oh,
so
I just had a request that, when people show documents, if you could, after, who's ever taking the minutes, if you can email the links so that I can include the links in the minutes.
The ones I've shown are already in the agenda doc. And I will add Ron's. Was there another one?
yeah, so just to follow up on that 2-year, so I haven't spoken to Ron directly about this, but personally from a conservation perspective and land acquisition perspective, Milton is under a lot of pressure for development. And we just town meeting, just surprisingly to me, voted to take land out of conservation and tear down, trees to build a new school. And I don't want to argue if we need a new school or not. My daughter's a teacher. I understand all the needs. But from a land acquisition standpoint, just drive around town. Like, I've been in town 50 years and, just recently I was taking one of my guys to go see a job and he's been working for me for 20 and he's like, oh my God, look at all this construction in Milton. Look at all these trees that are being taken down. There's a lot going on, just go down Randolph Ave, memory care, 300 trees coming down. So to me, I do feel like there's pressure to come up with some type of strategy to conserve our green spaces, open spaces, somehow come up with money to buy more space. My understanding is even the CPC was a little bit surprised that nobody even put in a proposal to buy some land. We should be working with property owners to come up with a plan. So it's a very aggressive timeline, and I understand that. But I do think it's really important. So I do applaud Ron's, aggressive, if some people call it aggressive, but I approve his timeline.
Yeah, so it's probably a good time to start segueing into the goals and take a look at let's see. Take a look at what we put into the Airtable. And I'll just relate it back to you. You asked about a template. And so I'll just try to describe the process I have in my mind. Because I think doing it all in documents, in a Word document is really hard because it's going to be such a big document right away. And finding stuff in it becomes challenging, right? And then if you have like, hey, we're working on this strategy. Doesn't that kind of apply to buildings and electricity and also transportation? Oh, let me cross-reference 30 pages farther in the document. Oh yeah, I'm a data person, and so I think in terms of spreadsheets and databases, and just have this powerful desire for a database of goals, a database of strategies, a database of actions where I can just, if the strategy relates to 2 goals, I can just link it to both of them. And then when I want to see all the strategies that relate to a goal, I just run a query and I see them. And you don't have to decide. The thing I kept bumping up against was, well, do I put this under buildings or do I put it under transportation? Or innumerable questions like that. So I just started by setting up share again. So there's all this Zoom stuff on my screen. I can't see the tabs.
Apologies, I need to drop to join a different meeting, but I'm looking forward to the meeting on Monday with the.
The rest will be up on YouTube.
Okay, that's great. Cool. Thank you. Everyone have a good night.
Oh, it's okay. Everything's in there. Thought it was filtered on building. So you guys found a lot of goals. That's awesome. Part of what I was doing was testing whether I could impose some restrictions. But ideally, the goals that we put in our climate action plan would relate to some existing state goal. I think we quickly ran into cases where there were very reasonable goals that we ought to be working towards that don't have any corresponding state goal, like under heat waves. We're having trouble finding any coherent state goals for heat wave readiness. It doesn't mean we shouldn't have any. I'm sure we'll find some at some point. So I think the exact structure I'm happy to change, but basically I started with goals at the town level, at the state level, and what I envisioned was having this place where you can submit things into this table here, explicitly link them together. And then I add a strategies table and an actions table so that just as you think of things or you find things that you're reading in other towns' climate action plans that you think sound like a good idea for Milton, you can just put it in there and not worry too much about, is this a good idea or have I put it exactly the right way or has anybody else added this? You can just add it. But then everything will be in here and we can, within the working groups or when we're merging everything together, later on we can refine, deduplicate. If we realize later that a strategy links to 2 different goals or 3 different goals, we can just add those links later. And then generate a document from that at the end, rather than trying to edit an 80-page Word document by committee for the next year. All right. So we actually talk about the goals that are in here.
Just a question about the model. So what you're talking about is sort of the front end of the logic model and how you so we'll start looking at a particular action. Is that when you sort of do the back end? What is the outcome, and
I think these sort of like secondary. I haven't really thought about how to track unintended consequences or like secondary impacts of things. I wanted to just get to a place where if we're planning to do something, we can relate it to a strategy that we know relates to reducing emissions.
right, but we're not going to go down to a very particular action. So we're not going to think about the particular outcome or output of that.
Yeah, I mean, so there are goals in here from the state's roadmap to get 28% of all commercial and municipal buildings implementing energy efficiency retrofits by 20. And they've quantified how much emissions reduction, they've modeled how much emissions reduction to get that. Probably the first thing we do to move in that direction is going to be some kind of outreach program. It could be impossible to quantify. I mean, it'll be difficult to quantify. It's possible to do it in advance. If we measure success, we might be able to back something up. Yeah, but it's, the adoption curve is going to be an S curve. Getting fixated on, well, we better do an equal amount every year. We're going to make it feel fair. Yeah.
In the interest of time, how about each group takes one or two goals from the state one and maybe discuss how they think that could flow into a town goal, and then maybe even with a strategy.
Yeah. Or even just sharing with the group one or two that surprised you, the new information for you. And that I didn't expect that people would have figured out how we begin moving in this direction for tonight. But yeah, how about transportation? Let's go first and talk about one or two of them.
So I'm looking at row 36. It's kind of general. Increase alternatives to personal vehicle use. Increase short distance transportation alternatives. And then if you look at the description, if you click on that, the description is a 15% reduction in passenger vehicle emissions by 2050. I was a little surprised. I thought that was kind of small. But I guess if that's what the state is saying, then maybe it's more achievable than I thought. So if the town plan was to reduce passenger vehicle emissions by 15%, then some strategies would be to look at, reinforcing bike infrastructure, electric vehicles, how people commute to work, promoting carpooling, promoting, guys, I also represent the school committee, so I'm big on getting, carpooling and buses, maybe electric buses, incentivizing less, one adult and, one family driving and maybe multiple families coordinating. So those would be some strategies that would go under that.
Yeah, related to it is this other one, number 30. There's a goal to reduce light duty vehicle miles traveled per household. The state's plan modeling anticipates total vehicle miles traveled to increase.
Right.
But that's still within the pathway that's been laid out. So as long as the conversion to EVs is happening at the pace they're anticipating, the goal is really to limit the growth of vehicle miles traveled under a ceiling and achieving that through.
Right. So what they're acknowledging vehicle miles traveled will increase, but there'll still be a reduction in emissions.
Yeah. So an individual household will first of all be driving lower emission vehicle, and
I'm comparing the two goals.
Fewer. Yeah.
So you could have the individual household vehicle miles decrease, but also like overall you want the emissions from passenger vehicles to decrease, even though total vehicle miles has increased. Right.
I'm a little confused. I think it's 15% less than would have been if people drove the same amount that they drive now with population growth and all that. Because there's a goal further up here to reduce GHG emissions from transportation by 86%. So I think that's the gross reduction by 2050.
Yeah. But that's all transportation, right?
All transportation.
So the other one is, it's like,
it gets a little confusing.
Yeah, because you have different grades of, you have a lot of units in here. You have to wrap your brain around what they mean. Anyway, so here, just how to define one goal and one strategy. It does get very complex. All right, I'll pass to the next person.
Oh, I have a question. Now, are our goals, like especially for buildings and transportation, you know, I'm a firm believer that you lead by example. Now, is it easier or should we look at for if we are trying to reduce you know, short-term travel or carpooling, does it start with like our town employees? You know, Jack might not like this suggestion, but instead of Jack hopping into his DPW truck to go somewhere, would he hop on a bike? Like, are these the policies that are internal at town hall? You know, and is town hall putting together, you know, they're reducing, I know they have solar panels on like Cunningham, but as I said last year, it was broken. And no one knew it was broken for like a year, and I believe it's still broken. So I just, you know, if the town is going to create a plan for us residents to follow, then I think that they need to follow it as well. So is that where we start, like
I think at the strategy level discussion?
Yeah, okay.
I can't imagine that we wouldn't address the municipal component of this, though.
The example I gave was targeted at, what was it? It was passenger vehicles. So, you know, one aspect of that is, you know, households, but another aspect is the municipal fleet. And, you know, I definitely have thoughts about what the goals for the municipal fleet would be, but that's a much smaller slice compared to, you know, the number of households, but it does set a good example. So I think, you know, part of what we do is to look at what levers do we have. We have more levers to have the town government be a good role model. We have less levers to get, you know, individuals in a capitalistic country to adopt certain measures. But we can create, you know, incentives to do that. So that's kind of my thought on, you know, in the way I'm approaching these goals.
So in the interest of time, I'll just quickly do a couple for buildings. What do you want to do next?
Is it possible to build into your data sheet more near-term outcomes?
I will, shortly after this meeting, I'll add a strategies table and an actions table, and people can start putting stuff in there. Near-term outcomes, I guess outcomes, you can put that in the goals table and the target date on that. I only put 2030 and 2050 goals because that's what the state is defining in this table, but you can put any date you like in there.
Okay.
Yeah. So so the other goals table is for ones that we want to propose for Milton, and my only ask there is to make it like a measurable outcome. So I think they're, not to call you out, even that you put some things in there like let's investigate such and such. I see that as a strategy. So when I create the strategy table,
and when we put things in the sheet, should we put everything that's in the state with specifics of where we won't do something because it's either not enough? So we have addressed everything that's in the state plan. So if something doesn't pertain to us, we aren't going to do anything about it, but we can explicitly state we're not.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we don't put any strategies against something, it'll be clear that we're not doing anything about it. There's also a component of strategy, which is deciding what you're not going to do now. And to the extent that we're making some tough decisions to not do something, probably worth recording that. Yeah.
It might be good to just have a lexicon of our terminology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying.
Yeah, because
I have actually written a short summary of this in the draft climate action plan that I started over the summer. I think it's accessible to you guys. In that first overview slide deck, I linked to it. It's in Sustainable Milton's SharePoint drive because I can't work with the online. Doesn't let me do anything. I'll send that out afterwards. So quickly, knowing we're a little short on time here, building goals, there's a sub goal to reduce emissions from residential heating and cooling by 95% by 2050 versus let's see, capture here. 92% for commercial and industrial heating and cooling. So they're differentiating by sector a little bit. And then going down into the sort of priority action plan, the chief levers they are looking at to achieve that emissions reduction goal are home energy efficiency. So there's goals around 24% of single family homes having an energy efficiency retrofit by 2030, 63% of existing homes having one by 2050. And this is just like better windows, better insulation, not the heating and cooling equipment. There's a separate goal for 20% of housing units electrify with high performance air source heat pumps by 2030. That's a ridiculously ambitious goal. That's kind of what the modeling says is necessary to be on. But also 4.5% doing it with geothermal heat pumps. So there's a couple different technologies that they're focused on. They're likewise similar goals for commercial and municipal. So that's what I'll focus on for buildings. And Arthur, I did put in the few that you told me about for waste. Do you want to speak to those quickly?
This is the state goal for a 30% reduction, as stated here, 2030, and a 90% reduction in solid waste disposal by 2050. No question that the latter is extraordinarily ambitious, but much of this is driven, as Jack may attest, by the fact that we are losing landfills. We only have a couple left open in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and maybe in 1 or 2 years there'll only be one open. And then, of course, there's the difficulty of shipping to states that will have landfills open and what the costs of that entail, and then the extent to which their landfills are going to gradually close as well. And we'll be breaking down a number of topics. You have food waste going into composting, what goals might be there. You indicated that when we were having a conversation recently, Alex, at 10%. And in a couple of the plans that I'll be working on with Kim and company on Monday night, we'll be seeing what it is that they're setting up for this particular activity. And you were indicating, as some others have, that Sustainable Milton is very interested in moving the needle on food waste diversion in the town of Milton. Right now, I believe we only have about 300 participating households. Jack, could that be it? And the desire to increase that significantly.
Yeah. So
we also have to look in this total context at communications and the extent that they're passive or active, if I can use those two terms, and people understand the availability of alternative resources and actions that can be taken, as well as looking at what it is that town can afford. The topic of affordability in Milton is a very important one. And I hope that part of the work that our committee will be doing is moving away from the way in which much planning has been done and more toward not how we solve today's problem for today, but how we anticipate tomorrow's problems and needs and resolve those on a very timely basis. Some of the plans in other communities for waste management go back to 2019. That's true for the city of Boston. It's true for the city of Cambridge. The town of Brookline in Norfolk County, a cousin of Milton, had his plan in 2021. So we have some good models to look at, but we have a lot of catching up to do on a short string.
Yeah, and just to sort of an example, you were asking about shorter term goals. Sustainable Milton working on a goal of getting to 600 Black Earth subscribers in the next year or so. And that would be something that we could drop into the goals table to put a 1 or 2 year target date on it and be working on that now. Right? And it obviously links back to this. It's hard to see how we get from 600 to 90% reduction in waste disposal. That's a crazy number.
Yeah, and just as a question, does Black Earth use electric trucks to go and do it?
These things are all interrelated. They do not, no.
Emission greenhouse gases, are they contributing?
Between now and 2050, I bet they'll switch.
Oh, that's good.
To Maggie's point, if I may, for just a moment, that's recognized very broadly by communities. And one of the things that is being looked at until there might be alternative fuel means for heavy equipment, such as trash trucks, as we call them, is introducing measures whereby trash reductions might be reduced from once a week to once every 2 weeks by setting up programs, educational programs and methodologies that reduce the amount of trash that's consumed by or yielded by individual households. We also have to be looking in this community now at something that we didn't have to look at before, and that is large-scale buildings, the 40Bs. Now, these 2 of which are going to have 90 or more units in them, and how we manage and prepare for that today rather than wait until 4 and 5 years from now when they're all on stream and say, oh, Milton has a problem. We have to get away from that culture and get to the problem solving and anticipation type of orientation.
I'm looking at the time, and we have one more agenda topic. And I apologize, Matt, for squeezing you. We talked a little bit about conservation goals. Are you comfortable with moving on to topic 6?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I talk a little bit about a new development in town, proposed development by the Gardner School. Let me give you a little background here. So it is a 7-acre lot on Blue Hills Avenue. The sale is pending to the Gardner School, which is a for-profit private pre-K, not to be confused with Goddard Schools, which is another pre-K private school in town. So this is the Gardner School. The current land has no utilities, no roads, no cutaway to Blue Hill Avenue, is heavily forested and is quite sloped. And from what I understand from folks that have been to the site and people that are close to this issue, is it's going to be a massive undertaking to develop the land, clear cutting trees, bulldozing, etc. And expected that there'll be significant habitat destruction and potential for stormwater runoff. There was another potential buyer in town for this land who's a resident whose bid was unsuccessful. Her property abuts the 7-acre parcel. She offered what she thought to be fair market value and proposed to put the land into a conservation trust. So that's the background. 7 acres, Gardner School, big undertaking, a lot of trees getting cut down, another buyer in town that tried to buy it at a fair offer. Again, I'm not, the detail of that is not really what's at issue here. But it was not approved. So why do I bring this to Milton's Climate Action Planning Committee? Number one is, and Maggie, you brought this up earlier, is we should be thinking about keeping our natural habitat. And in fact, this could represent a setback in our own goals, right? So as Alec has already said, is that the state goals are to increase permanent conservation lands to at least 28% by 2025, at least 30% by 2030, and at least 40% by 2050. And so at a high level, again, as Alex said, and Alex, I'm going to use your math since I trust it, is that although we're above the average right now, estimated about 33% of conserved land to the state's target of 27%, if we wanted to increase in line from a percentage basis with the state goals, we need to be conserving around 104 acres of new conservation land by 2025, over 300 acres by 2030, and over 1,300 acres by 2050, right? So if the state has got a target of X and we're already overdeveloped to X, the state's not counting on us to reduce, it's expecting us to increase at the same level on a percentage basis. Otherwise, their math falls apart, right? And they would expect that in all the towns as they're looking at conservation land across the Commonwealth. So we actually need to be conserving more space on a percentage basis, just to keep up with our fair share, if you see what I mean in terms of the state goals. So number one is a setback for our own goals within Milton from a conservation standpoint. The second is from a coordination standpoint. Again, I'm new to the committee. I'm new to town, politics in a way. And so how do we better coordinate amongst the various town communities is really the question. We've got CPAC here in Milton. We're striving to meet our own clean energy goals vis-a-vis the state targets. A conservation committee, I talked to Tom Palmer and John Kiernan, who visited the site. And John, last year, Maggie, you spoke about CPC applications for purchase of land. They actually proposed helping this resident buy the land. So they did submit an application to CPC, but that application was not approved. Open space and rec planning, I reached out to somebody that I know on that committee. It's not really an active committee. I'm sure there's a reason why, but they would also potentially have a seat at the table. And then, of course, the planning committee has got an important seat at the table here. And while I've not had a chance to talk to anybody on planning, as I'm just trying to get up to speed here, I understand that it's on the agenda for next week's planning committee meeting. And so, number one, again, I see it as a setback to our own goals. Anytime we're selling land to a developer when a resident was happy to buy it, and most likely is going to not maintain the integrity of the land. They're going to build a school, and you can look up the site plans and what they intend to do there. And it seems to me that it's very unlikely that it will be a small building with a small parking lot and a whole lot of trees. At least that's not what the current site schematic looks like. And so while I'm not ready to move to the third point, which is about what can be done or even concessions yet, right? If the sale does progress, what can we negotiate to maintain the integrity of that land? So that's it. Really, it's as much a discussion about how to coordinate with the other committees as it is, essentially giving you an update on a piece of land. But I think it's important that we're at least all aware that it's potentially a setback to our own goals, and that through at least the resources in town that I've been able to track down, we tried. We weren't successful, and I worry about the next one. And that's what I've got.
Interesting you brought that up, because I talked to the town administrator today, and I've been struggling with this and I've been frustrated. I've been on the planning board for only 2 years, but this is my biggest thing. And, one of the things I asked him was, like, for instance, the Conservation Commission, and Arthur could speak on this, has a tree fund. And I just asked Nick today, I said, is there any way that we can take some of that money, because we as a town have a line item in our budget for trees every year. And, can we take possibly some of the money from the conservation tree fund, and can we use that in a more broad application, and can we use that to acquire some land, and we need to set up, and I talked to him, and I said, we need to set up like an open space acquisition fund. And how do we get that started? And I said that to him. I said, the town has not done outreach for property owners, and probably now, as I said to him, the people I talk to are a little bit nervous about leaving land to the town just because of the whole Land's Woods debacle. And how do we get and convince people to work with the town and come up with some type of plan? And it doesn't have to be large tracts. 7 acres is a big enough area, but some people have small lots, and sometimes it's the smaller lots in neighborhoods where there's not a lot of tree canopy and there's heat islands everywhere that really are important. And you look at Amore Road, it was 1 acre on the corner of Amore Road, and the developer bought it for $500,000. That's $500,000. And why couldn't the town of Milton come up with $500,000?
Maybe just one more before somebody jumps in is that this resident who I know quite well has been working on this. I heard about it probably 3 years ago for the first time. So in terms of exhausting all resources, this is one where, every phone call, every ear, every, process that could be followed, she did. It just didn't, either there's not enough, Maggie, like you said, maybe funds need to be repurposed, or she missed something, and she doesn't seem that kind of person that would have kind of exhausted all kind of town options here. So, maybe something can be fixed in the future, but at least for 7 acres, it's a big piece of piece of property. Again, it's not approved yet, but let's just say it's not trending in the right direction. Having exhausted all means within.
We're over time, and I really have to leave in the next few minutes here, so I'm gonna try to pull this out of details. I'll just say, I think it would be premature for this committee to try to get involved in this particular outcome as a committee. Everybody's free to work the processes they know about. I think it's a great case in point of the kind of thing that's going to come up between now and 2050. And I agree with you, Maggie. You need to develop a strategy for how you approach these situations in general, build capacity to acquire and protect land. And I think having a slightly longer term focus now will be helpful, rather than kind of trying to change an outcome as the Climate Action Committee that's happening right now before we built that capacity, rather than viewing it as potentially an opportunity to learn what didn't work, what could we have done differently, and how can we sort of turn that into a playbook for when these situations come up in the future. Arthur, you want to make a comment, and then
I'll be very brief. Thank you, Alex. I think what this conversation is pointing to is systemic problems to resolve. Matt pointed out about the need for coordination, articulation, and collaboration among different committees. We have an open space and recreation plan committee that hasn't updated its plan from since 2006. Some of its wording is contradictory. You can't tell whether it's focused only on public lands or public and private lands. Other communities have, as Maggie was referring, I believe, to acquisition funds in reserve. I am affiliated with another town in the Commonwealth where I spend a lot of time. 85 acres of land went up on the market in that community last month. The town moved and acquired it because it had planned and positioned itself to be able to do so. It was anticipating the future. You can't, again, as I said earlier, wait for the present to solve a problem that can only be resolved by future planning. We also have to take a look at conservation restrictions. And there's no reason why we can't advertise and market to the members of the community their ability and the tax benefits of putting conservation restrictions on private property that they and their heirs will retain. There are plenty of mousetraps to follow in working down this road. We just have to do it. Identify, plan, and execute. End of speech.
Thank you, Echo. So I'm late for an appointment across the green here, so I will entertain motions to adjourn. Okay, Lisa moves to adjourn. Eric seconds. Any no's?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Adjourn.
Excellent. You can pretend I did a roll call. Thank you, everybody. It's really great to
Thanks.
see you, and let's keep these passionate discussions going in the working groups.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.